I was working with a couple a while back, and they got entrenched in their position. She looked at him and knew that he was being a jerk. She was right, and he was wrong. And she kept on saying her point over again. You're being a jerk. You're not paying any attention to my side. You're wrong. And he was entrenched in his side. She was unfair. You don't understand me. Get off this position. Can't consider another perspective other than your own. They were both entrenched. Now, most intimate relationships, if they go past a certain point, end up in conflict. And often one of the forms that this conflict takes is mutual entrenchment. And what do we want to do when I'm entrenched and you're entrenched? I want to make you less entrenched. I want you to see my point. I want you to shift off of your damn rigid position that is just so full of it and so exaggerated and so unreasonable, and see my position, which is completely logical and reasonable and serves God. That's what I want. Now, I might not use those words or even those thoughts, but you get the point. Entrenchment, rigid. This happens on every level of human relationship, but let's talk about it happening in marriages. Let's talk about it happening between lovers. What do you do about that? Well, what I did with this couple is I said, hey, look, I'd like you to talk about your entrenchment. I looked at the guy, I said, so talk to me about your entrenchment. How are you entrenched? What's that about? He went, well, I get defensive and it's hard for me to change my mind. And then he went on about how she was wrong. And I asked her the same question. It was the same thing. So you got to be patient. I said, let's talk about your entrenchment. After a while, after we went around, because when you're in a defensive state, you don't want to pay attention to stuff like this. Defensive state is our nervous system reads the other person as unsafe, and then we have amplified emotions, we have distorted perspectives, we have destructive impulses, and we have diminished capacity, less capacity for empathy and self-reflection. Both these entrenched people were in defensive states, and so just had to slow it down until their nervous systems felt safe enough to begin to examine, self-reflect, empathize, have a little empathy, question the destructive impulse to just keep again and again and again attacking the other person's position, begin to think that their opinions about the other might be a little distorted towards the negative, their emotions might be a little bit amped up. I began to consider it and began to look at their positions. And so I did my best to have her talk about her entrenchment to him and him talk about his entrenchment to her. And of course, as they began to do that, things began to soften. And we began to get below the surface. Below the surface, when two people are entrenched, is both of them are suffering because love's not happening and they're blaming the other person. And what do you want? You want love to happen. And so those attacks, even though it sounds crazy, those attacks are designed to try to get my love back. You're keeping me from my love. And so as I examined my entrenchment, as I examined how I'm keeping myself stuck, as I go below the surface, I go, what I really want is loving connection with you. I want us to understand each other. I want us to find ways of accepting and caring each other and yielding to each other in appropriate ways and guiding each other in appropriate ways. Gradually, this couple began to soften until they were there. And I asked them, how do you feel about each other now? She said, well, I feel closer to him. He said, well, I feel closer to her. And I said, this is what this has been about all along. Now, this underlines one of the great principles of being a couple. And this principle has been misunderstood by marriage counselors for 70 years. So this is secret knowledge. You're going to love this. People think that you can get back to love by arguing about issues, trying to solve issues, and then we'll get back to love. That's not how it happens. If you want to make progress on an issue, get back to love first. And the way you get back to love is remembering your basic bond and examining your part of the problem, and talking about your part of the problem, and then encouraging your partner to do the same thing and listening with compassion when they do. You get back to love first, and then you deal with issues. You try to get back to love through dealing with issues, it's just... And that's what happens with entrenchment. So when you get entrenched, you know how it feels. You feel rigid, they're wrong, I'm right. And all your impulses say, explain to them how wrong they are, or get out. Stop and say, you know, I'm entrenched. I'm locked down in a position. Let me examine my entrenchment. Let me examine how I'm locked down, how I might be distorted, how you might be right. Now, this doesn't work 100% of the time. Nothing works 100% of the time. But it'll work a lot. If you do it consistently, half the time it'll make things better. And if you and your partner do it consistently, 85% of the time, it'll make things better. And that's great. So that's about entrenchment. That's about the secret of resolving issues. Get back to love first. And the secret of entrenchment is examine mine, share mine with you. Become connected with my hunger to love you and be loved by you. That's what's driving this argument. And we get off our entrenchment, we can get back to the serious business and the joyful business and the light business of loving each other and helping each other through this life.